I'd like to call this meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our February 22nd school board meeting on the budget. And let's all please rise for the presentation of the colors by the Career Center, Air Force JROTC.
Color. Hope. Post. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Center. Haste. Forward. March.
Please be seated. We have a very limited agenda at this evening's school board meeting. We're going to hear the superintendent's presentation of the budget. Just to be clear with everyone here, there are no public speakers this evening. It is simply listening to the superintendent's presentation. We will adjourn this part of our public meeting. We'll go in the next room and have a work session, which is also on video. And at that point, if school board members have questions and comments, we'll be doing them as part of the work session. So this is simply the superintendent's presentation. Because that's all it is, I'd like to invite my board colleagues to sit out there so that we can look directly at the PowerPoint presentation instead of turning in our chairs. Thank you. If you'd like to stay, you can stay.
You good to go? Thanks. Well, good evening. It is a pleasure to be here and to be presenting this evening's proposed budget. I have made several presentations already to different groups throughout the day with the proposed budget, and one of the comments that I've started out with each presentation is to say thank you to all of the individuals that have been involved. I think we've worked very closely with a large number of groups and folks to develop this proposed budget. I think there was a lot of energy and good decision making and well thought out decision making to bring forward the budget that we have here this evening. I especially want to thank Leslie Peterson and her team here with the Budget and Finance Office. I see a number of them here with us this evening, so appreciate all their work in getting this budget together. We were slightly delayed with schedule this year, but I think that gave us some extra time to really concentrate and have some well thought out conversations. I too want to thank the executive leadership team, our principals and school leaders, as well as many of the folks in the central office, as well as the community at large. I think we really benefited from the extended period of time with the conversation, and I think there was an awareness of some of the tough decisions we've had to make. Coupled with that, many of these decisions are not ones that I particularly like or are my preference. They are difficult. They, perhaps run in the opposite direction of many of the things that we see as a priority for us. And those key points include keeping students at the priority of what we do, our core instruction as far as what happens in the classroom. Coupled with that, we recognize for all those things that happen that are positive and good for students and families, our staff plays a critical role with that, whether in the classroom or outside the classroom, in whatever supporting role they have, they make the difference about what our priority is, and that's kids. And then finally, you'll see as kind of a consistent theme here, we have a number of things that are happening, most significantly, a growing school division. And how do we look forward, and how do we enable ourselves in the thinking that we have as we move forward in the out years to have a sustainable budget that really provides those essential core services that we see that are key to the success of our students. I'm just going to encapsulate some of the highlights of information that you'll hear from me as I work through the presentation. The first is my revenue neutral proposed budget this evening is a total of $636.7 million. I made mention of the value of our employees and how they play a critical role in the daily activities of our school division. So again this year, and this is actually the 4th year in a row, I'm going to be including a step increase or a compensation package in the budget. Coupled with that, we are continuing to move forward with the under market salaries with our bus drivers, bus attendants, and our instructional assistants. So we see that as another priority in us being able to move forward. One of the things that we look at too is our cost per pupil. And I do want to make mention this year that there has been a $105 reduction in our cost per pupil. And I also want to make mention that the cost per pupil has maintained relatively flat, as you will see, with an enrollment increase in the last 10 years of over 8,500 students. So let me quickly just outline for you with an overview of how we really constructed our budget, what the base around that was, then the summary of revenues and expenditures, what I see as our 2019 expenditures, and then how we were able to reach through a pretty extensive, involved and collaborative process with a number of different school leaders, revenue neutral budget, which is my proposed budget at this point in time. I will also share that I've communicated today is really the spark that lights the flame. The budget season begins now and runs through May the 3rd, so there will be a variety of ebbs and flows, changes that will occur, and also an opportunity for dialogue with our community and our staff to continue. And I'll provide a calendar at the end of the presentation that outlines that. You can see the basis is built around our strategic plan. It's also then coupled with the annual school board priorities, which I often call are the school board's work plan for the year, and then the budget direction that the board provides me on an annual basis. This outlines here the budget direction that we received from the board. I think one of the highlights that I just want to make our community and our staff aware of is that we traditionally use a three-pronged approach, and I think that's been very helpful in maintaining levels of consistency. The first is that we use the available and new revenues to address many of those issues concerning growth. We also look at how there can be possible savings, efficiencies, or reductions as a second prong. And then the third prong is we use one-time funds or reserves as we see appropriate. And once again, we've been very successful, I think, here in utilizing those in this budget, and I'll point that out. I think the recognition also is how do we continue to look in providing opportunities and choices for students during the time that they are here. And I think there's evidence again in the budget here today and our proposals that we are continuing to look at how we can individualize opportunities for students. We can personalize those experiences. But at the end of the day, how do kids thrive? And I think that is really at the core of how we've been able to be successful, is that so many students are able to thrive here in Arlington, and there are a variety of reasons across a broad landscape for that. But as we look at some of the priorities, we see reaching 30,000 students, that enrollment growth is significant. Our continued commitment to excellence, also the fact that we are on a very aggressive capital program and continuing to provide seats for students, and then realizing as we grow, we're going to have to look at how we provide our services. Do we need to change the way services are delivered, and make adjustments with the various instructional models that we have out there? We use many of the same communication approaches and opportunities for feedback. I'll just make note, again, Ms. Peterson and her team putting together the Citizens Guide to the Budget, as well as the Budget at a Glance, and we'll be having those materials. And many of the other strategies used in the past, but I do want to note that middle particular one with the collaboration with our central office and principals, and just say thank you to all of those, especially many of our principal leaders who we work very closely in developing the budget that you're seeing this evening. The total here is 636 as part of the revenue neutral budget. To give you some idea of the increase from last year, it's 3.8%. Over the past 5 years, the increases have ranged anywhere from 3.1% to 5.4%. So this budget's just about in the middle of the road as far as the percentage increase. You also see many neighboring school divisions have similar increases, somewhere running around 4 to 5%. Looking real quickly at a summary of revenues, I want to thank not only the county government, but the citizens of Arlington here. We realize a large transfer that makes up the funding here for our school division. And I think without the strong belief we have in public education and the support of public education, we would not be able to realize the system and the school education that we provide our kids. So thank you to all of our Arlington citizens, and also thank you to the folks who work in the county that are partners with us. You can see that the transfer is 78.2%. That is just slightly down from the previous years. You can also see that the next largest amount of revenue is from the state. In the last couple of years, that's ticked up very slightly because of enrollment increases, but this year it's relatively remained flat because of some other issues that are happening throughout the state with population shift. As we look at expenditure summaries, you see salaries and benefits make up the largest portion, over 77.7%. And that's because we are in a people business. We invest in people. We want to make sure we retain the best and the brightest. And I think that's very evident here in how our budget is structured. You will also see debt service is the second largest expenditure. This is up 1.1% from last year at 9.1%. Last year it was 8%. When we then look at a distribution of funds, we have 7 funds in the school's budget. School operating obviously being the largest, and 88.3% of that school operating fund is made up of salaries and benefits. And again, I think that just continues the echo that we are a people business. We invest in people, and people make the difference ultimately in the classrooms and as kids come and go to school, and how they ensure that our students thrive. Again, parallel to the previous slide, debt service is the second largest fund here in the distribution of funds. All of you have seen this before, and it's going to slowly reveal, but this looks back to fiscal year 2009. It just so happens the top numbers are going to be in the reveal, the student population. The bottom number is going to be the cost per pupil. I've forecasted a little bit that the cost per pupil remains relatively flat. Actually, in the first several years, it does tick down. But you can see also what happens with enrollment in the fact that we increase based on the projection next year, it's 28,027 students. So here we go, slowly kind of with the reveal, gives you a picture of what's happening with enrollment as it gradually increases anywhere from 3.5% to over 4% annually. And then with enrollment, an enrollment increase during the same period of 43.5% in that 10-year period, we see our cost per pupil actually decreasing 1.6%, and this per pupil enrollment is down $105 from last year. So when I move now to the expenditures that I'm recommending, I started with a team, and that team, in working together, really believes that this is what we had planned for our fiscal year 2019 budget. And so there are a lot of initiatives in here that you may see that are familiar, also things that represent the board's direction that I wanted to make sure that I incorporated in the proposal. The first being the investment in our staff. So for the fourth year in a row again, we have a step increase as part of this year's compensation. It's a very competitive market out there in our region for classroom teachers, for bus drivers, for attendants, for whatever roles that we have that makes our operation go. And so I think declaring that and maintaining that competitive salary edge is a priority, I believe, for all of us. Along with that, we continue with the adjustment of under-market positions for our bus drivers, bus attendants, and also our instructional assistants. This is the second of the 3-year rollout, and at the end of next year's budget, this will bring all those folks onto the market position. When we also then look at providing program options and growth, I want to congratulate our principal at Arlington Tech, as well as our principals at our middle schools and our counselors for facilitating the new growth of this program. We had over 200 students apply this year to Arlington Tech, and all of those individuals have been accepted, and I hope they all elect to attend. But to continue to have that program grow, we have close to $2 million in staffing, materials, and supplies, and that's just slightly over 20 positions. And again, I think this points to the fact of how do we provide these type of opportunities for kids really to thrive and grow? And I think we've seen with Arlington Tech and the type of instructional model that they offer and how our kids are being successful there, this is just a perfect example of seeing those kids be successful and thrive in another type of learning environment supported by some great individuals who are making this happen. So thank you to all of them. We've also talked about enrollment growth, and many of you have seen this before. We'll break it down as far as the gray bars, talk about those cohorts of graduating classes that have left us, and those range anywhere from 1,300 plus to 1,500 plus student cohorts. We then have the blue bars representing cohorts of our current enrollment, and you can see grades 12 through about grade 6. Those cohort sizes range anywhere from about 1,600 to 1,900 students. What begins to dramatically change, though, is in 5th grade and pretty consistently then through K, is those cohorts are representing 2,200 students pretty consistently. And then as you look to the projected enrollments in the out years, we also see cohorts coming forward. So as we drop off some of these smaller cohorts, we'll be adding larger cohorts in the out years if the projection numbers continue to trend in the way they are. And that is why you're seeing increases here kind of across the entire school division. The need for more teachers, the need for more seats for students, a very aggressive capital program that continues to roll forward. So then when we look at enrollment growth, the enrollment growth this year is at $5.8 million. A majority of that is for additional staff and materials. I do want to make note, we have highlighted that the need of relocatables, and that's the need for relocatables because currently we have a surplus to move those relocatables or site them in the places where we have a particular need. This is much different than what we may have seen in the past years where we spent several $1 million for acquiring relocatables. Now we have a good inventory, and I think we're going to be able to strategically move them and place them where they're going to be needed in the future. The enrollment growth here, by the way, is slightly over 1,000 students, which is projected at approximately 4%. We are also looking in the fall of 2019 to be opening 5 new schools. We're going to be bringing 2 new schools online specifically. That's going to be the new the Drew Model Elementary School that is going to become a neighborhood school, and we're right now in the process of hiring the new principal for that school, as well as a new middle school principal at the Stratford middle school site. So what we've traditionally done here in Arlington is prior to the year of the school opening, we hire the principals. We also hire support staff that are coupled with that. We also have additional startup costs that we need to begin to prepare for those schools opening. And then we also have a debt service associated with many of our capital programs. You may be doing the math at home and say, well, Pat, you mentioned that you were going to have 5 new schools opening, but you're only hiring 2 new principals. We have existing principals in 3 of those other schools that'll be making that transfer. So 3 of those principals are already in place. Several years ago, we established a progressive plan or a way for us to implement some of the things that we saw that were priorities around student supports and instructional needs, additional needs for support staff. And so we rolled out what we looked at growth initiatives, and that was over a 3-year period. So during that time to date, we have hired 24 combinations psychs and social workers and folks who play critical roles with academic supports. This is the last year of that 3-year growth initiative rollout specifically for these initiatives. We've also continued to hire additional bus drivers and attendants as our bus fleet has continued to grow. We've brought on additional technicians in information services and also identified additional safety and security needs. I see our psychs and social workers very important to our academic program, especially today in light of many of the things that are happening across our nation. They play a role just like our teachers in our classroom in supporting students and supporting families and making sure students' well-being is such that they are able and ready to learn. And I think this has been a very smart move on the part of the school division to make sure that those support systems are in place. And so having that again as something to continue as we move forward, I see very much as a priority for us to maintain that focus. As we see more opportunities for students, we also recognize that we're continuing to grow. We need to make sure that we have the resources and the support systems in place. So when you say we need additional classrooms and additional teachers or additional staff in whatever role they play, we need to make sure that the business operations side of the house is also aligned so that when contracts or procurement procedures need to move forward and not cause delays with maybe construction projects or operation, that those delays in the long run don't wind up costing us resources. The same is true in our human resource area, making sure that when we are in the process of hiring new staff and being able to bring them on board, that we do that in an expeditious way so that we can get those folks in place either in the classroom or in some type of supporting role in our school division. And so our business operations need to mirror the fact that we are going to be growing to a 30,000 school division. So these additional growth initiatives really support that and prepare us for 2021. So when we look at all these expenditures across enrollment growth, compensation, growth initiatives, business and operational supports, those expenditures are exceeding the revenue that we have available by $16.5 million. So this brought us then really to the discussion, all right, how do we move forward here, realizing that there are a variety of budget pressures that we've got to make, also realizing we need to do this in a collaborative decision-making process so that all voices are heard that are going to be touched or affected by this. And I have to say that we were very fortunate this year to bring a good core of folks together. These were not easy decisions. They were difficult decisions to make. They are preferences that I must say that I wish we did not have to make. But I think to really achieve that revenue neutral budget, this is how this then transpired to move forward in that direction. One is, look at some of the delivery models for our instructional programs, also talk about a sustainable future, but also making sure that we maintain competitiveness with our workforce. So the first, I think it's good news that we have is that while we have devices, both student devices and also devices either in the classroom, technology devices, we were able to work with one of our vendors with a buyback program. And as we life cycle some of these technology devices, we are realizing savings of $1 million that we see that could be adjusted with our bottom line. Coupled with that, we're also recommending increases with our aquatics fees. We have some excellent aquatics facilities, and being able to maintain the services that we provide the community demanded us to look at making some fee adjustment at this point in time. And then finally, this is an example here of how we've utilized the one-time funds with our minor construction and major maintenance to make an adjustment. I'm always very cautious about this and bring this out. While this is perhaps a strategy that we use occasionally, it does present in the out years the fact that we could experience a gap if we did not have additional revenue or revenue in reserves to be able to address that. And I think we found that our MCMM program has been very successful in keeping our students, or our schools, up to date and highly functioning. We also had to make a number of reductions across the system, and again, this is where I think the leadership team, our central office folks, our principals, all of us, we really came together and looked at a variety of different ideas, how we could roll those forward now and also for consideration in the future. And you'll see some of that a little bit later here as part of the board's direction to me about how we look forward and make sure that we have a sustainable future. So I'm going to go through kind of each one of these subcategories and talk a little bit about what some of those changes are. We'll start with changes to the planning factors, which I know the board has had some preliminary discussion on here in the fall. And the first was to look at our foreign language in the elementary school program and make adjustments as far as the amount of time that we have for that program, and as a consequence, that would make an adjustment with the staffing that we're providing schools presently. So I think this also touches potentially many of the other special areas, art, music, physical education, and also is planning time. We did not want to take a large step here, recognizing there could be a ripple. So in working with our team here, we looked at how we could make that adjustment with the amount of time students have in that program per week. And this will make some adjustments with the staffing that is provided to each of our elementary schools. We also looked at the Montessori program, grades 1 through 5, and I'm recommending that we align the staffing or the planning factors aligned to all of our other elementary schools, aligned to the Montessori program, which will bring an adjustment with staffing assignments there in that program. We talked very long and hard also about class size recommendations for class size increases. And so we've used those very judiciously across some of our grade levels. I'm recommending a class size increase by 1 in grades 4 and 5. At the middle school level, a 0.75, and at the high school, a 0.5. And then finally, with planning factor changes, looking at clerical staffing at the high school level and making an adjustment there with that planning factor to reduce the number of clerical staff in our high schools. Looking at then growth initiatives, we talked very long and hard about where we were with psychologists and social workers. While it is not my preference to eliminate this, we've postponed this as a possible step that we would take this year and delay it to next year's budget if funding does not become available. There was extensive conversation about that. This is in light of the reality that we have hired an additional 24 positions the past 2 years. Part of this also, it's reflected here, 11 of those 14 positions would have been dedicated to psychs and social workers. The other 3 positions are academic support for our level 5 English language students. When we move then to the Department of Teaching and Learning and some of the changes there that I'm recommending, looking at library media assistant contract days and making a slight adjustments there. Also looking at clerical or administrative assistant support. We've talked previous years about online classroom facilitators for many of our virtual courses, and so we're making some changes there about how those courses are going to be provided. So there are several positions there that we're going to eliminate. And then finally, the Department of Teaching and Learning is aligning all of its core and co-curriculum areas to have similar staffing. And so we're making some adjustments, some fine, rather small modifications there within some of those particular curriculum areas. When we then look to the professional development, employee benefits, and other reductions, some of the things that we're looking there is with employee benefits. Those are for non-standard benefits. We're not looking at many of the standard benefits that we provide our employees. These fall out in some of the non-standard areas that we're making those adjustments. So when we come back then and to reach my 636 revenue neutral budget, the initial revenue is $630.2 million. The recommendation that I had coming forward beginning the budget process was initial expenditures at $646.6 million. There's a difference there of 16.5. You can see the lion's share of the additional revenue and use of reserves falls out into the MCMM or at 6.5. And then we have the expenditures reductions and service changes at slightly over $10 million to get us to a proposed bottom line of $636.7 million. Looking forward, as the board asked in its direction to me, how do we ensure that we have a sustainable budget looking forward? Also, with the reality that we're bringing on 5 new schools in the fall of 2019, which will be really part of next year, fiscal year 20's budget. And so these were some of the ideas that we've discussed here over the fall and into the winter as we continue to look at planning factors, as we look at transportation efficiencies, as we also look at how we are using technology devices, how we possibly could collaborate across departments with the counties, and then also look at the various service models that we have in place. So continued dialogue, as I shared with many of the administrators that we met with this morning in my initial presentation. These conversations will really continue through this budget season, but really pick up momentum as we move into the spring and into the summer in preparing for next year's budget. We've got a budget calendar here that highlights many of the work sessions and the watermarks that we have along the way. Following this meeting, we have a work session that will also be live streamed. Next Tuesday, we have our first work session. I believe it begins at 5 o'clock with our employee groups. We then move into a work session at 6 around teaching and learning. There's the March 15th work session with the school board's advisory groups, and then the public gets a chance to comment on my proposed budget on March the 22nd. The school board takes action on its proposed budget on April the 5th, and then there's a public hearing on the school board's proposed budget, and then we're slated for adoption of the school board's budget on May the 3rd. We'll continue to update this. Much of this information will live on Engage, so I'll point folks to that as we move through the budget season. And I just want to say thank you again to all of the parties and individuals that really played an important role in this year's budget development. It is very much appreciated. This was not an easy budget to arrive at, and I think it just speaks well to the conscientious nature that everyone brought to the table and the good thinking that we've been able to arrive at this point. What follows, or what I'm going to introduce that follows here, is just a brief video that gives you a little bit more background and thinking from some of our community members, from some of our school leaders, and also from our students who I think recognize and appreciate what all of us do to enrich their lives, but also the support that the community provides at large, and their really strong belief in public education, which I think is an important element, especially in our society today. So here we go. As we kick off the fiscal 2019 school year budget, I want to thank all those individuals that were involved. You'll hear from many of the different voices from our students and staff and many of our instructional leaders. I think in developing this year's budget, we wanted to maintain the core of our instructional program, and that's what occurs in the classroom. We also want to make sure that we continue to attract high-quality folks to Arlington Public Schools. They are the lifeblood that makes us go. And we also need to think, as we continue to grow, how do we develop and continue on the path of a sustainable future that provides a high-quality public education for all of our students. So let's hear from some of the voices that were involved in developing this year's budget.
In building a budget, one of the focuses was to build one for a sustainable future. So the ask was not just to look at the current fiscal year, but to also project ahead, knowing that the growth would continue to happen.
So given our enrollment growth in APS, we really need creative thinking in order to balance our budget. And this year we came together as a collaborative team of school administrators, central office administrators, to try to identify what can we give up, where is there places that we can make changes that won't directly impact the classroom.
We were able to spend a lot of time with each of our individual groups, being very open and honest and protecting the quality instructional programs that we all have in our elementary, middle, and high schools.
The most important thing is to continue to provide an optimal learning experience for all students, regardless of the number that we have. Maybe being asked to do things in different ways.
We are right now in a good place and want to keep it going on the right direction. The only way is to always think about the kids.
Well, any teacher will tell you that their greatest reward is getting to work with their students. In order to recruit and retain the best teachers to an area in which an average house costs about $650,000 and childcare expenses hover around $1,500 a month per child, it's vital to offer a salary that's both competitive and adequate to cover cost of living in Northern Virginia.
I really love all the resources we were given, like the iPads in middle school and the MacBooks now, because it has really helped us have interactive learning and do so much more, and it's easier to contact your teachers and to turn in assignments and stuff like that.
This county is a great place to grow up, to educate your children, but it takes collaboration from all parts, from administration, from teachers, from students and parents coming together to do what's best for the students of Arlington.
I feel very fortunate because we have such great buildings and we have so much to offer at these schools, and the teachers are amazing.
Without any of these resources, I wouldn't be a good student. I wouldn't be a super student. I just stayed to being an average student and not pushing myself forward. And if I didn't have those resources, I wouldn't have known that I can do better than what I think I can.
There's always extra learning, not only in school but outside of school, because this county provides you so much opportunities that can get you very successful in life.
Every kid has the chance and the opportunity to be who they want to be, but only with the collaboration with the county and the schools.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dr. Murphy. We will now adjourn our meeting and start our work session, how about at 7:20 in the room next door. Folks at home, you can find us streaming on our website. Thank you.